Please welcome to the stage Stratascale Chief Strategy Officer, Jordan Mauriello.
All right, guys, we're going to get it kicked off right on time here so that we don't cut into your happy hour, but it's pretty impressive when you get introduced to come up here by the guy from the movie phone voice. Some of you guys, I hope, are old enough to actually get that joke here. We are reintroducing the Stratascale brand with an exclusive focus on cybersecurity services. We have built and will be continuing to build the capabilities to make us the premier high-value security partner. This is something that's key to our strategy. We think it's something that's key to our customers, and this is my opportunity to get you to reintroduce you to the idea of Stratascale as the cybersecurity services division of SHI. More of that to come as we go through the presentation. But first, let's talk about what it means to have a cyber strategic goal or a strategy for cybersecurity in a business today. In my objective opinion, I would assert that the objective of any cybersecurity strategy should be an obsessive focus on protecting revenue generation, revenue opportunity, company reputation, while defending against loss via fines, fees, and other legal punitive measures. In the end, guys, it is always all about the dollars. And this is important to understand that statement as we go into an update about what's happening in the cyber threat landscape. We talk about attacker and tech trends, and specifically the impact of AI, and maybe a little bit of a different approach as we talk about the impact of AI today, because I'm not going to talk about how you would be using it. Instead, I'll be talking about how attackers are using that to make themselves better and how they would put your environments at risk. But first, let's start with attacker trends. Now, at the top of this list is something that if you work in cybersecurity, you're probably familiar with. If you're not, we're going to break this down a little bit. And that's the idea that the attacker is always moving closer to the revenue. This idea that every attack, for the most part, should be monetized for the attacker today is prevalent across everything we deal with. But that idea is underserved by my industry specifically as we talk about cybersecurity, because it's overshadowed often as we want to talk about nation-state threat actors and hacktivists and the things that happen in their world. And the reason for that is because we're all geeks. And we like to take apart the sophisticated and highly complex attacks that took near miraculous technical capabilities to accomplish. And so we'd rather be talking about what happened at the Iranian Natanz nuclear facility when a nation state broke in there versus what happened at the accounting firm in Houston, Texas when they lost $2 million in a wire fraud attack. Why? Simply because it's far more interesting to talk about that. But the reality of what faces your businesses day to day is that 99.99% of the time, you are not dealing with the nation-state threat actor, and you are not dealing with the hacktivist, you are dealing with cyber criminals. Cyber criminals like the Russian Business Network, or RBN for short, as they're commonly called in our world. This is a registered, tax-paying business in Russia that calls themselves cybersecurity consultants. And they pay taxes on revenue in the order of hundreds of millions of dollars a year. And their business is breaking into American companies. They've been around since 2007. And it's a good example of how we think about how does a hacker monetize an attack and how has that changed to move closer to the revenue over the last 20 years in the cybersecurity world. See, back in 2007 when they were formulated and they wanted to monetize an attack against an organization like some of yours, they would conduct a massive phishing or attack campaign. They would compromise as many machines as possible. They would deploy the infamous InfoStealer Trojans, which many of you may be familiar with from old school antivirus alerts back in the day. They would collect as much information as they could about your users, bank account information, passwords, logins, if they could, personal health information, social security information. They would productize and package up those identities. They would take them to the black market on the dark web. They would sell them in a non-fiat currency, something that was anonymous and non-traceable. They would need to then translate that over to or translate that to a fiat currency that could then be moved into Russia and registered as income for their business, and then they'd pay taxes on it. It was a long, arduous, and multi-step process that was highly complex. There's way more steps than I even articulated there that had to happen for that to occur. And so when we look at what's happening in the world now, it helps explain why we see this constant movement to the easiest way and the highest confidence ways that they can achieve payment or monetization for their attacks. It explains why you guys are seeing more and more wire fraud scams. It explains why what happened to a customer of ours when they were targeted by an attack which targeted one of their customers. And it posed to be our customer in the logistics industry, and it had the right accounts, a receivable person from our customer, the right accounts payable person from their customer, the right email signature with the right font, the right color, the right logo, the right tag phrase at the bottom. And they sent them an email that said, we are changing our current banking. Here is the information for the new accounts to send all payments to in the future. And then just like that, $270,000 goes out the door. And it's lost. That cannot be recovered. Right? It's about moving towards easy payment. And we see this across multiple areas right now. In fact, right now, CrowdStrike has been talking about this probably more than anybody else in the industry. For those of you who don't check out CrowdStrike's annual global threat report, I highly recommend you read it. Even if cybersecurity isn't your main job, they do a phenomenal job researching this every year. Even for somebody that's worked in the industry for over 25 years now, I always get new insights out of this. Write it down, take a note, download it, and read it. It's free. But they've been talking recently about insider threats like famous Cholima. In fact, I talked about this yesterday and then was sent an article by one of the SVPs for our PubSec sector that this was actually written about on CNBC just yesterday. And so what's happening is famous Cholima is making a mechanism out of getting you to hire fake remote employees. Now, maybe real people and real people take these interviews, but they're experts at making themselves look qualified to take jobs that would give them access to your money. So where in your business do you think those jobs exist? Shout it out if you've got an idea. Finance, accounting. Show of hands in the room. How many people think they have rigorous background checks and validation for employees that are going into accounts payable and receivable as compared to they might for, say, security roles? And now you understand why. This is why it's the target, right? And so what we're seeing them do is go into organizations, get jobs in finance, get jobs in accounts payable, and change payment structures. We've even seen at one organization where they changed all of payroll for one payment, out the door to an attacker and gone. Imagine if something like that happened to your business. Absolutely detrimental. This is what this attacker is working on right now. Movement closer to the revenue. Constant trend. Now, the next one, you would think, well, how does that make sense to align to that? Because attacking manufacturing businesses would seem difficult to monetize. And we have to understand that the next piece of that I said is also guarantees of payment. Now, I've never talked to a CFO of a manufacturing business that can't tell me off the top of his head how much money he will lose hour by hour if the manufacturing floor is down. We got called in an instant response for a manufacturing business in the South. They do windows and doors primarily as a business. Their manufacturing floor was compromised, taken down. Hour over hour, they were losing $170,000 of revenue. CFO knew right off the top of their head. The attacker was asking for $2.6 million in ransom, equivalent US dollars. It was in another currency that they wanted it, but equivalent to $2.6 million in revenue. How many hours does the manufacturing floor have to be down before it makes sense to pay that? And how quickly is the CFO willing to make that decision when you get close to that line? Very, very quickly. Absolutely, ransom was paid, systems came back online, remediation was done afterwards. Guarantee of payment, moving closer to the revenue, and makes it easy for them to make sure they can monetize the attacks. This is important for us to understand as people that are running IT environments. This is the threat we're facing. It is about our dollars. That's what the attackers want. And so we have to build our strategy around protecting those dollars. Right? The next thing that we're seeing from a trend perspective is about the overlap between nation state and cyber criminal activity, especially where we see this in areas where we would have nation states that are against us. Now, to be clear, right, America is also a nation state threat actor. They're just not on your list because you are in the United States. But if you are outside of the United States and you run a business in China or Russia, to be very clear, we are absolutely at the top of the list of nation-state threat actors that they have to worry about. Based on my previous job, I can attest to this being actually true. And we see significant overlap occurring now in this world where we see the exact same tactics, techniques, and processes and procedures being used by the nation-state threat actors as the cyber criminals, going as far as to seeing the exact same pieces of malware with the same hash, the same compiled binaries, the same processes they use. And what can we infer from that? Well, one of two things. Either the cyber criminals are moonlighting as nation-state threat actors, right, and the government is saying you should work for us in the evening because they actually have some of the highest skill levels, or the nation-state threat actors have permission to also moonlight as cyber criminals to make their own income. One of those must be true in this situation based on these assumptions and a considerable data set across a lot of threat intelligence sharing that happens in our industry that has proven this to be true right now. So what can this tell us about strategy and things that we should be doing? We'll talk about that more as we get to the end of the presentation. First, let's talk a little bit about how AI is actually impacting our industry, and maybe not in the most positive way, but again, how are attackers using this? Right? If we go back, about 2 years now when we all discovered that ChatGPT existed and everybody hopped in and was unfolding the creative capabilities, if you will, of large language models, and they asked it ridiculous questions like I did, like create a photo of Santa in a fighter jet delivering presents. I particularly like how it turned the presents into missiles. I just wonder if Santa has the liability insurance to cover that. But beyond this, we have to think about that the creative capabilities that extend to creating something like this image also then extend to do abilities like code creation and extend to doing that in a manner that may or may not be able to be malicious. Now, I will caveat this by saying, one, everything that I will show you in this presentation was done in a public large language model that you can have access to for free today. I will not name it. And two, this is a jailbroken model that was only jailbroken with prompt engineering, meaning I fed it logical statements that convinced a large language model that it should allow me to do things it should not normally or was programmed specifically not to do. It is not that hard to accomplish. It took me about 4 prompts, and then the LLM was completely compliant to do almost anything that I wanted to do with it. You can look this up at your own time. One of the things to consider on this that might inform you a little bit about what model I was using is that the problem with safety programmatically being built into a model is that if you distill one model from another, right, distillation process is where we train a large language model off of another large language model, right, safety is not inherited to the new model. And so if you have somebody like, let's say, DeepSeek, I'm not saying that that's what model this is, I'm also not saying that it isn't, right? But if you have a model like that that's out there, and you inherited most of the large language model capabilities, but not the safety precautions with ChatGPT, then you might end up with a problem where you will also produce potential code that could be malicious. Like, can you write me the framework for a Python script targeting the Windows RPC service like, and I call out a very specific CVE vulnerability. And it gives me a beautiful piece of code that does exactly that. The right API calls, the right structure. My next question to it very simply was, hey, can you help me write this to target a more recent vulnerability? Which it did. And then my next question was, can you turn this into a Metasploit module for me? How many people in here are familiar with what Metasploit is? Okay, a few hands in the room, those of you guys who work in information security. It is essentially the ultimate automation tool for hackers in the world. You plug in a name of a system, you plug in what attack you want to do, it goes and conducts it for you. You need very little knowledge. So the skill level of what is required to successfully conduct an exploit against what was an attack that was released 7 days before this. It was a patch that was done by Microsoft that it turned around and targeted in the RPC service that was similar to this one. It took me about 15 minutes to take it from normal large language model to jailbroken large language model that was giving me working exploit code that would attack and give me access to a system. That process, real world, what it would have taken me to do that when I used to do that work for a living, and Microsoft would drop a new patch on Patch Tuesday, and I would take that patch and do a binary diff between it and the old file and say, what did they change? Why did they change it? And how do I discover the vulnerability that exists there? That would take me, on average, about 72 hours to conduct that kind of work. And then I would turn that around to an exploit that would take me probably another 12 to 24. So within 4 days, 96 hours, I would usually be able to generate a working exploit that our country may or may not have used in places to break into systems that we needed access to. The time difference 96 hours, 15 minutes. What does that tell us about how change is accelerating in our space right now and how cybersecurity is being changed and the impact of AI? Even more so when we look at processes like deep reconnaissance to target an organization, right? I put in my own organization for this one. Can you analyze data for the company Stratascale, and I gave it our URL, use LinkedIn and other social media to find recent changes to leadership, new employees, and optimal targets for a potential social engineering attack? Now, I changed the names up here for the sake of the innocent. Everything it pulled out of here is completely accurate. Who changed in my leadership team, what's changed in the business, new people that have joined. It found new hires, and it gave me a targeted list that if you post attacks coming from me as the new leader of the business to these brand new employees who probably haven't had a chance to meet me, here is the right structure, wording, and way you might formulate that to have the most successful attack. That would have normally been 30 days worth of research and work to build a target package. That took 30 seconds to accomplish with a large language model now. Evasion, another use case for LLMs. Right? We talked about not having solid use cases for large language models in business that everyone agrees upon. Attackers would disagree these days. These are very valid use cases that they're using it for. I gave it a file and I said, can you modify this binary file? I need it to be changed in such a way that the MD5 and SHA-256 hash will be different without changing the functionality of the program. Specifically, I'm looking to take one file that you can currently detect as malicious and change it to a file that you no longer detect as malicious. It did that for me almost instantaneously. It told me how it did it, where it added a new section header, where it changed some no-op commands in assembly language to other useless commands that can be used for padding, gave me a new file back. It worked perfectly, and now it avoided any of the detections that the XDR solution was doing based on hash. So how is this impacting the industry? How do we respond to changes like this? Well, one, we have to adjust our plans to be more agile. As strategists who are building budgets, who are building plans for your IT organizations, your cybersecurity strategy, especially around what you will do, what you will spend on, and how you approach that spend, can't be written in stone for years anymore. And I would even, in fact, encourage you to write in gap in your budget to adjust for what new threats will hit the market in the coming years. Our agility as an industry has to change to adjust to the speed of development and the speed of change that attackers will be able to do these days. Two, response capabilities. How many people within the last quarter have tabletopped their incident response capabilities in their organization or been a part of a tabletop exercise? Show of hands. Okay, so a little less than half. I would highly recommend this be something you're doing once a quarter. Make sure it happens. It's very low cost. You can bring in external providers if you really want to make the scenarios exciting and up the participation level and energy around it, but you can also do it yourself for free. There's great scenarios out there. You can look up, download templates that exist from multiple security organizations, and you can run them yourselves. It is worth the time investment. Three, training and awareness. People are still the first target. They're still the biggest attack surface, and you've got to make sure that people are aware that the phishing emails they're getting no longer come through with language like much amaze, very wow, look at this link, please click. It's very different now. They're grammatically correct, written in perfect English, even if that's not their first language anymore. They're often targeting your people. They're able to research and find emails on the internet that have the right signatures, the right logos. They're able to make it look like it legitimately came from an internal person. And they have to be aware that what they're looking at is no longer the obvious factors anymore. But they have to be willing to take a step deeper in and be a part of securing your business in their everyday work. This is important for us to understand because the EUC, the end user compute, the devices that we all work on every day, are inexorably tied to cybersecurity. We cannot separate the need to add new compute power, add new AI power on the endpoint, improve the capacity and the efficiency of the devices we're using from the need to secure them. The device and the user are still the first points of visibility and the best points of telemetry that we will get into targeted attacks against your environment. And it's essential that this becomes a core part of your strategy is to secure those devices. So as a business, what are we then doing to respond to this for you? Well, this is where I reintroduce this slide again. right? The cybersecurity services division of SHI. And this isn't about just being a me too and saying, yes, we also have cybersecurity services. This is about us building a strategy and literally bringing some of the best talent in the industry into the SHI portfolio so that we can bring you high-value, premier services that actually make a difference in your organization, that can help you reshape the outcomes to match what's happening in the industry, that can keep up with these kinds of attacks and changes, and that can help you build a strategy that will keep your business safe for the next 5 to 7 years. But if you don't have the right partners and you don't have the right expertise, it will be very hard to keep up with this. All of this research was done by our team. It was done by our threat intelligence team, tracking actors, working on the dark web, building personas that actually go on these forums and scrape the data of the things they're doing and actively monitor it. You need an organization like that that can come in and talk to you about what's happening in the world of cybersecurity so that the decisions you're making about what you will spend on, what you will do, and what does need to happen in your organization are still the right decisions. Because I'll say this, most of the cybersecurity tools you have right now are good enough to do the job. But are your processes, your people, and your readiness matched to what the cybersecurity tools can do? Are they configured properly? When have you tested them? How did you rate that test? What framework are you aligned to? Are you scoring yourself? Are you looking at year-over-year improvement? The programmatic approach to building a mature cybersecurity program is the biggest differentiator you can have between the next piece of low-hanging fruit the attacker might want to go after. Now, a brief look at some of the services that we're adding. I'm not going to go in depth. I just want to cover real quickly. We're building out services across multiple areas that we can come in and help businesses. We're going to continue to add this. This isn't going to be the menu that exists in infinite state, like where it keeps adding things forever. This will be a set of things that we believe we can truly be great at, because I don't want to bring any service to market that I can't put my name behind and actually be proud of. And Ty certainly doesn't want me to do that either. We want to bring premier services that bring value and bring reputation to our business. But most importantly, we want to make sure we're helping our customers avoid the common pitfalls that are out there. These are the things that actually hurt businesses when trying to build a strategy that can align to the technical capabilities to stop the type of attacks that we just talked about. People are not analyzing the risks before prioritizing spend. A lot of times you see people picking the technology before they actually get deep into the framework and the risk, and especially the ROI that's needed. Right? We're moving away from controls frameworks before determining dollars allocation. We're not aligning to what is the actual improvement and how would we prove that to a board so that they make sure they have confidence what we spent made a difference in risk for the business. Right? They're not tabletopping new technologies. When you deploy something new, are you making sure you also rerun your tabletops? Are you incorporating that data? Are you making sure the right people have login access to deal with it during an incident? Because the last thing you want to be doing is trying to figure out how you get the new security guy access to the new tool you deployed when you're in the middle of an incident. And last but not least, plan your deployments and capabilities, not just your technologies. Choose the KPIs that you want to move and the desired impact before you choose what technology you want to buy. These are the kinds of things we want to be involved with you as a partner and helping to build, and making sure that you're getting this kind of program and this kind of success for your security programs long term. So last thing I have before we close out here, I want to take the opportunity to invite you guys to our June summit. This is a cybersecurity and AI focus. We will be talking about many things, deeper on some of the things we talked about today, deeper on capabilities, on how to mature your organizations, on how to build strategy, and we'd love for you guys to attend. So please feel free to take a shot at the QR code. That will allow you an opportunity to register June 17th and 18th here in beautiful Somerset, New Jersey. And with that, I thank you guys all very much for your time. Have a great day.